الرحيم الحمد لله وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد سيد الأولين والآخرين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We beseech Him to send His peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon his companions, his family, and those who follow them until the end of time. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. MashaAllah, it's great after being in kind of the large or confined. I don't think you can use the word confined when you talk about MCA. It's kind of like just infinite. It seems to never end. It's great to be back in more of a cozy community setting. And I was actually here in this masjid. This is the Ruby Masjid, if I recall, in the reign of Ilyas Baijan, when he was here, the brother of Imam Tahir. And when I was invited, I remember this building, where we are sitting now. So it was really a pleasant surprise to see the incredible work you've done in organizing yourselves strategically as well as financially to build this really beautiful structure next door, which is going to now, I think, accommodate around 800 people. And in our terms, that means like 3,000 people. I lived in Egypt, so I became accustomed to negotiating what space really means, right? The bus is for 20 people, and we get 100 people on the bus. So, inshallah, may Allah bless this community. Obviously, it's headed in a very positive direction. And oftentimes we hear so many negative things about our community, we forget to really notice the powerful work that's happening across the country. Since Donald Trump kind of articulated some of the more, I would say, controversial things about Mexican Americans first, and then second up to that, Muslim Americans, I've seen the opposite, which I'm sure the Islamophobes hope would happen, and that I've noticed a greater commitment to institution building. In New Jersey, the day after Trump made his spiel about registering Muslims, we raised like $700,000 in 30 minutes to extend a masjid. And then across the country, with regards to Syria, of course, and other issues, Muslim communities have really reacted very positively in a way that's, I think, forced the hand of many people to realize how great a community we are and how much we have to offer people. So with that in mind, what I would like to talk about is really the fact that one of the things that the Prophet Muhammad did is he gave us a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. And we learned this in the Quran, that we should not become overly enamored by the superficial. Oftentimes we get caught up in numbers or the size of a building or the color of the mushaf, where ultimately real work is going to be done when it's rooted in a strategic vision, which is rooted in a very powerful meaning, a purpose. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says very powerfully in the Quran, مَا خَلَقَنَا رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ, right? Our Lord, you did not create all of this in vain. There's a purpose behind it. We believe in theology. It's mentioned in all of our famous texts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't do something abathan, which means there's no purpose behind it. Shah Waliullah Dahlawi, of course, the great scholar, Hujjatul Islam, in his book Hujjatullahi Baligha, he opens up this book in Persian. It was written in Persian, published in India, of course. And he talks about the fact that really people should be aware of the fact that everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does, there is great meaning. And we believe as Muslims that the meaning, the divine meaning, is brought about through creation. So we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through His creation. We know Him through His creation. And He says, وَلَقَدْ زَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِيحَ. We beautified the creation for people. People reflect. يَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Those who will submerge themselves in the purpose of the creation of the heavens and the earth. And their response is, رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ فَقِنَا عَذَابَ. So the Prophet ﷺ and the Quran teach us to really move beyond the superficial. And I'll give you some examples. Oftentimes people get caught up in the beauty of something. That, don't get me wrong, it's important. The process of in Allah Ta'ala Jamil Yuhibbul Jamal. Allah is beautiful and He loves beauty. But sometimes, you know, I remember when I was young, I used to play basketball, and I'd always ask the people at the shoe store, like, are those shoes going to make me jump higher? You know, are those shoes going to make me quicker? I played for Blake Griffin's father, so there was a lot of pressure on me in high school. Are those shoes going to help me? And, you know, one guy, he told me, you know, the shoes have very little to do with the outcome. Right? That's just like the wrapping on the paper. So if we look at the Quran, we find that it encourages us to look at the deeper meaning of things. And it does so in a number of ways. Number one is in institutions themselves. So the institution of prophethood, the institution of the Quran, it's not enough just to have some kind of fashionable relationship with those things. You know, I was in a Muslim country once when I was reviewing my Quran, I was reviewing, and I had reached the part on Yasin. So I sat outside these people's home in a Muslim country, and I was reading Surah Yasin. I had no idea what that meant culturally to people. You know, to see a man with a beard sitting in front of someone's home reciting Surah Yasin. For me, I'm just making maraja' of Quran, and then their phone started ringing. You know, what do you think they asked them? See a big guy with a beard in front of their home reading the Quran. Who died? Right? Who has been struck with some kind of massive trial? And that's the meaning of the Quran in that situation. It's problematic. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He alludes to this. He talks about the people of Mecca. He says, وَتَرَاهُمْ يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَيْكِ. He says, oh Muhammad, you see them, they're looking at you. وَهُمْ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ. But they don't see you. It's very interesting in Arabic what's happening here, because ara means I see you like this. But ubsir means I see subtleties. Imam al-Asfahani said, يعني بصيرة بمعنى إدراك اللطائف وإدراك الأسرار وإدراك الحكم. He said basira means to understand the deeper ethos behind something. Right? So Allah says about the Meccans, the disbelievers in Surah Al-A'raf, يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَيْكِ. They're looking at you. وَهُمْ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ. But they don't understand your meaning. They don't understand really what you're about. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The same thing with the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the Quran, إِنَّ هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ يَهْدِي لِلَّتِي هِيَ أَقْوَمُ وَيُبَشِّرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Right? The Quran is a guidance for people. And it directs them to righteous deeds. وَلَا يَزِيدُ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا خَسَارًا. But evil people, what they'll take from the Quran is evil. It's hard for us to imagine. Right? We think of Quran, we think of good. The idea is, do they understand really the deeper purposes of the Quran and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? So we're immediately taught to think at a deeper level, to think about the meanings of things. And that's why, for example, in the fundamentals of theology, we say لا يجوز تقليد في الأصول ولكنه في الفروع. You know, it's not allowed for me to say, well, just because my father or my mother are Muslim, I'm Muslim. Or my relatives back home are Muslim, I'm Muslim. No, I have to acquire the meaning of what it means to be Muslim, and then I attest to that meaning. That's why it's called shahada, because shahada means I'm bearing witness to a meaning. The meaning is La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. The second is related to institutions and congregations. And that's very important for you here. The elephant in the room, right, is that you're building this incredible facility. But, thank you. But what does that mean to the city that you live in? What does that mean to the children in your community? What does that mean to the women in your community? What does that mean to your neighbors? This is something that, unfortunately, when I do consulting for Muslim organizations, nonprofits in America, and I ask them, what do you mean to people? They have no answer. Usually the answer I get is, we invite sheikhs. So I asked them, like, what sheikh did, oh, we invited you. Okay, so Richard, your neighbor, he doesn't know who Suhaib Webb is, doesn't care. Doesn't have any meaning to him. So as an institution, we have to think beyond the idea that once you have the grand opening, you're done. No, before you open, and before, and I'm sure you're doing this already, and before you entertain the idea of having this incredible facility, you understand that you should not get caught up in the aesthetic of the actual institution. But you should think deeply about how you're going to craft its place and position amongst the Muslim community and amongst the non-Muslim community. Meaning, crafting a community-led strategic vision. It's crucial. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us of this in the Quran. He says, أَفَمَنْ أَسَّسَ بُنْيَانَهُ عَلَى تَقْوَى مِنَ اللَّهِ. Allah says, and as for the one who built his home on taqwa, taqwa is a purpose. Taqwa is that there's a reason behind now the establishment of a structure. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually condemns the idea in Surah At-Tawbah, Masjid al-Dirar, of a mosque that has a bad purpose. And that's why the scholars, they have a maxim that says, Al-ibratu bil-ma'ani laysa bil-asma. That concern is given to the meaning, not the shell. That concern is given to the substance, not the decorations. Right? So the second thing that we see is within the framework of institutions. And you're building a powerful institution, inshallah. Incredible structure. The conversation around what does it mean to the community? Obviously, there's community buy-in. Alhamdulillah, because you funded this incredible institution. And then what will it mean to the people around us? Islamophobia, within that regards, is a battle of meaning. We're going to really just cut it down and rip it to its bare bones. Islamophobia is about crafting a meaning that Islam and Muslims mean something to people, and then making that meaning palatable not to the far right, but to our allies on the left. The third is community members. One of the things that we maybe fail to appreciate is the meaning of the Prophet's message. You know, sometimes I ask actually young Muslims when I sit with them, what does it mean to be Muslim? And now they'll say, you know, to stand up for our rights, to be invested in the struggle, right? Because struggle forces us to engage meaning. Who am I vis-a-vis an adversary? Right? But prior to that, when I would ask young Muslims, and I ask them this question, what is Islam? Wallahi al-azim. I'm talking about children who are raised in masajids, who went to Islamic schools. And I would ask them, what does it mean to be Muslim in the modern world? I'm talking about college kids. And they would tell me, this is the first time someone asked me this question, and I don't know. Right? That should be of concern, right? That people are coming into powerful institutions, whether through an educational experience, whether through a religious experience, and then they're walking out with the absence of meaning. That's more of a concern for us for the following reasons. If we do not provide meaning to each other, someone else will do it for us. If you're a young Muslim woman in America, and you go through institutions and you feel that you don't have meaning, and then you run into people who say that Islam is patriarchal in its nature, you run into people who are critical of Islam on certain issues, that may affect you. If you run into ISIS as a young teenage boy or teenage girl, and you don't have a meaning around Islam, that may be what gives you meaning. So institutions being able to package and pastorally provide meaning. And that's why I believe, and I said it today, I think we should have like shahada parties for our teenage children when they become of age, like you have the bar mitzvah in the Jewish community. This is not bid'ah, right? This falls under what's called tajdeedul iman, refreshing of the iman. And also you create a relationship now between this young person and the institution. That, you know, we have welcomed you now as a member of this community. You've said La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, alhamdulillah. So now you have a stake in appropriating your meaning through the institution. People walk into our communities, not here, it's small enough that you have meaning amongst yourselves. The drama and the good stuff, right? The Tyler Perry aspects of it, and the Bollywood aspects of it, and then the successful aspects of it. That's meaning. Whereas in larger communities, such as MCA, in Boston, we did a survey. We would ask people, and they would say, I would come here for years for namaz. I would come here for years in the Friday prayer, and I never really felt a purpose being outside of just my worship. I never felt that I had a stake in contributing to some kind of strategic outlook. And we're talking about people who are at Sloan Business School and MIT. We're not talking about people who don't know how to do this. So we started to ask ourselves, how do we think about what we mean as an institution? And then how do we craft a community-led kind of strategic vision? And then how do we empower people to contribute and be critical of the growth of that vision? That's really taking institution building at a different level. And the Prophet ﷺ was ordered to do this. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. Here in Arabic, something very interesting. He said, Shawirhum means take shura from all of them. He didn't just say the men. He didn't just say the women. He didn't just say, the chacha sahibs. He says shawirhum, all of them. That's why many scholars in the early centuries of Islam, some of our great scholars like Imam Az-Zuhri, when he would be charged with leading kind of the religious discourse for the broader Muslim community, he would actually take time out and go and live with different communities and talk with them. In Medina, he would come during Eid because he was Madani, Ibn Shihab. And Khatib Baghdadi says, he would ask the women, he would ask the children, he would ask the adults. He was taking a survey of people. He was trying to understand how to build a strategic vision and then craft it with the aid of the people around him. So Allah says, وَشَاوِرْهُمْ. This is the first part of the verse. The second is al-amr. Usually when we run institutions, we say, God, we can't talk to the people about important things. Right? They'll destroy everything. But Allah says, al-amr means something super important. Talk to them about those things. Craft a conversation with them, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We see this in the Quran. How many times does Allah Himself, subhanahu wa ta'ala, listen to community members who we would have never thought about? قَدْ سَمِعَ اللَّهُ قَوْلًا الَّتِي تُجَادِلُكَ فِي زَوْجِهَا. The woman who comes and complains to the Prophet, Allah listens to her. She has a voice in the growth and development of the community. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes even mentions the hearts of the people. أَقْرَبُ يَوْمَئِذٍ لِلْإِيمَانِ. On that day they were closer to faith. So even their hearts, their emotional states are taken into consideration by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the second is, we shouldn't get caught up in the beauty of a structure, the size of a structure. And this is not being critical of you, this is to inspire you, okay? Or how awesome it is. But what is that structure going to mean to people? And how is it going to be a game changer for young people? Like, we want a structure where our young people want to come to. And I learned this the hard way. Once I was in Oklahoma with my daughter, and I was asked to give a khutbah at an Islamic school for kids, the toughest audience in the world. Goodness gracious. If you can keep them awake, you've got a gift. Right? All those high school kids with all those hot Cheetos and now-and-laters and Dr. Pepper and Fetty Wap running through their veins. So I was at the mall with my daughter, and I saw all these teenagers, thousands of teenagers. It smelled like Clearasil and bad deodorant. And I said, man, what the heck is going on? And then, this is when you realize you're old. She says, Dad, you don't know? When you hear that, it's like official cha-cha status. You got your cha-cha card. So I was like, what? And she was like, Twilight. I was like, what the heck is Twilight? She's like, you know about Twilight, the vampires, they fall in love, werewolves? And I was like, so that's how so that was the world premiere of the last Twilight movie. So then I asked her, hey, tell me about this Twilight thing. And then she told me, a very strange story. A white girl in love with a wolf, or a vampire and a wolf. And then I decided, I'm going to give the khutbah on twilight. So I went there, and what's the topic? And these kids are like, oh God, it was a shit. And they said, today's topic is twilight. And they all went like, oh yeah. And then I had one young brother come to me and say, can you wait so I can get my friend? I'm going to see if he's home. Because they have school day in public schools. Because he's going to want to hear this khutbah. I learned something from those children. Right? If you are relevant and you're true to orthodoxy, but you're relevant, it's how you get meaning. Now, I didn't talk about twilight, by the way. It was a play on words. I hadn't seen that movie yet. But then when we were in the last week of Breaking Bad, this incredibly profound TV series about a teacher gone wrong. And I decided, I'm going to give a khutbah called Breaking Bad. It was the last week of the TV show. It was the conversation. Because in Boston I said, is it possible to give khutbahs for America? Not just for Muslims. So that the news will cover our khutbahs. There'll be a public conversation around our khutbah. So I said, I'm going to try to do something a little crazy. I'm going to give a khutbah called Breaking Bad. Kasr sayatik. Break your evil. Qatta' sayatik. Cut it off. So I gave a khutbah called Breaking Bad. Wednesday evening, we get a phone call from CNN. Hi, this is CNN. Obviously something's not happening in the world. Why did they cover this? They were like, would it be possible for us to first of all, how the heck are you going to give a sermon about Breaking Bad? And I was like, well, if I told you that, then there wouldn't be a story. Right? You got to come and watch it. Right? Well, is it okay if you send the cameraman and the mob? So CNN called us, and they covered Breaking Bad. Secondly, Shia people started calling. We're really sorry. We know it's a Sunni mosque. We don't make anyone angry. But, we really want the Breaking Bad football. And then they would say things like, but no spoilers. Please. I'm not caught up yet. I've been binge watching. Right. And then we had, by Thursday evening, non-Muslims calling saying, hey, I'm a non-Muslim. Is it okay if I come and listen to this sermon? And that's what I wanted to see would happen. I didn't talk about Breaking Bad, Walter. Right? I talked about how we become bad. The best people can become evil. The best people can become Pharaoh. The best people can go from being a chemistry teacher to a meth dealer. Right? That's the discussion. But the point is how you give meaning. Imam al-Haddad, one of the great classical scholars, said, the job of the Muslim is to tie the heavens to the earth. The job of institutions is to make sense of the world around our congregants for them. And one of the biggest challenges we have is we are torn between three things. We want to continue to make meaning and value from the past. So, obviously some of the things I'm saying now, someone will be like, well brother, this is not how khutbahs used to be. Yeah, and the khutbahs then weren't like the khutbahs before them. And the khutbahs that were before them weren't like the khutbahs before them. There was never a monolith in a discourse. The discourse is always, its wrapping paper has changed. Its fundamental message is the same. The third thing is community members. So we need to ask ourselves about what do we mean to others? How do we see ourselves playing a part in this community? And as I said earlier, the Quran teaches us that people are valued, even people who are considered very minuscule. They're heard and they're listened to. They have a place in the community. That's why we have Fard Ain and Fard Kifaya. We're taught to be individual, and we're taught also to organize as a community around causes. But you see something very remarkable. If we're to package the meaning of the Prophet's message, if we're to take the meaning behind the seerah, it's a very simple thing that we should digest and build off of. And that is, the meaning of the Prophet's message is to heal a fractured world. That's it. And the job of what the Prophet was sent to do, right, outside of Tawheed, which is of course the crux of it all, is to heal people. And his ability to make people feel valued. So as an institution, are we making people feel valued? Or is it we feel valued from them only? There has to be a reciprocation. So I'll give you an example. One of the communities that we deal with now, it's a very cold community. You know, people come, they pray, they leave. They're trying to create some kind of warmth. Historically, it was an ugly community. It was split between MQM and the People's Party. You know, who has time for this election? Let's worry about that. So we started something called Free Hugs Friday. Right? So a sister will sit by the sister's door. If you need a hug, I'm here for you. Brother will sit outside. Any brother that needs a hug, I got your back. It became viral in the community. When they stopped doing it, people complained. You know, where's my free hug? And then they noticed that their donations went up. We asked them, listen, do you have visitor cards like churches have for Jummah? You give to people when they come. Right? They fill it out, and then you have all these young people. Give them something to do. Hey, can you make these phone calls? Right? Would you mind calling these people? Not asking for donations, not asking for money. Just, you know what, really thankful you came to the Evergreen Mosque. Are you? And watch, Muslims will be like, are you sure? Like, you're not raising money? Like, are you sure? Like, do I need to give anything? No, we're just calling just to say we really appreciate your presence in the institution. Right? And what did they notice in that institution? That their donations rose. Right? The donations that were given without a buy or a request rose because now people feel valued. So one of the things that the Prophet does, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in healing a fractured world, is give people value. He validates them. It's one of his greatest responsibilities. As parents, whether we like it or not, we validate our children. As spouses, we validate each other. We are responsible for creating a sense of value. That's why in the classical books of fiqh it says, you know, it's commendable to say to your spouse, how can I make you feel valued? We were leading a workshop with young couples who are about to get married. And so I said, I need you to spend time alone now for 10 minutes and ask each other, how can you make each other feel valued? One of our volunteers in this program, she's in her late 30s. She said, Wallahi, no one ever asked me this question in my marriage. I said, shit, don't tell them that, man. Right. But then some of them actually struggled with how to ask this question. How to make someone feel valued. Our children to feel valued. So we are not feeling valued at home. How can we expect to feel valued in the community? So the Prophet ﷺ even takes the mistakes of people strategically and gives them a sense of value. We take our successes and devalue one another. The Prophet is so incredibly profound, ﷺ. He's able to take mistakes and teach people their value through their mistakes. That's genius. Not everyone can do that. I was listening one day to NPR here in the Bay Area, and there was this Hindu gentleman who I think he's worth like billions and billions of dollars. He sold his startup, whatever. And they asked him, what kind of people do you hire? He said, failures. I said, what do you mean? He said, I hire people who understand the value of losing. Like how to turn negative moments into positive energy. The Prophet does that. With our children, how do we talk to them? You know, one time we're doing a workshop with children, we said, can you write down the top 10 adjectives used to describe you at home? Wallahi, you will cry. Stupid, you know, ignorant, alu parata, not alu parata, ulum kapata. Alu parata is food. I'm a Gora Sahib, man. I haven't lived here a long time, I'm getting rusty. There's no daisies in DC, man. Ulu kapata. And may Allah forgive me for saying it in the mosque. But, you know, an owl's backside. You know, and I had this young Punjabi girl explain to me, you see, in our culture, owls are stupid. But in your culture, owls are smart. I was like, yeah, they called you an owl. That means you're intelligent. She's like, no, that means I'm the owl's backside. Super dumb. Like, you're not just dumb, you're like the back of dumb, right? And I was like, God, I need Prozac. It's depressing, right? Well, how do we talk to our children? You know, what type of words do we use to describe them? What type of value do we give their opinion? Sayyidina Ibrahim values Ismail. فَانْظُرْ مَاذَا تَرَى. What do you think about what I'm going to do? If you look at the conversation between Nuh and his son, right? It's a very passionate conversation. He doesn't order his son or yell at his son. He listens to his son and he says, listen, you need to get on the boat, man. You need to get on this boat. And finally he refuses. But he never debases him. He's hurt. Then Allah says to Sayyidina Nuh, إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ مِنْ أَهْلِكَ إِنَّهُ عَمْلٌ غَيْرُ صَالِحٍ. It's a value. Our spouses, how do we talk to each other in front of our children? Right? Your daughters, the first men they will learn how to love from is their fathers. And mothers, the first woman that a son will learn love from is his mother. Although it's platonic, it will be learned from that modeling process. That's why Allah calls you moon and sun, right? أَحَدَ عَشْرَ كَوْكَبًا وَالشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرِ. Right? Sayyidina Yusuf said, I saw the moon and the sun. Scholars said the moon and the sun are your parents. They shine light on you. In the darkness of dunya, they reflect it. Right? So value. The value that we have at home. And then the value in communities. People would make mistakes in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and he's able to redirect those mistakes to something positive. He takes the sternness of Umar and redirects it. He takes the craftiness of Khalid bin Walid and redirects it. He takes the economic prowess of Abdurrahman ibn Auf and redirects it. He's able to channel threats to becoming a positive contributing factor to his community. So I'm going to talk about quickly, and we'll stop inshallah ta'ala, is really moving forward. How can you be a meaningful community member? What role can you play in the community? The first is you have to lose your ego. It's very difficult. I have a problem with it. We all have a problem with it. Ego is a monster. But we learn from the hadith of Jibreel something very beautiful. And that is what's not said in the hadith is actually more, in some ways, very powerful. Because who, when Gabriel came into the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ, he came to ask him these important questions. Who's sitting with the Prophet ﷺ? Who remembers? Who's there? As Jibreel is asking what's faith, what's Islam, what's ihsan. Who's sitting there? Sayyidina Umar. What's powerful is that Sayyidina Umar never interrupts once. He loses his ego. You don't think that Sayyidina Umar, he knew what Islam is? يعني أخبرني عن الإسلام. You think Umar, he knows what Islam is? He goes that way, Shaitan goes that way. This happened in the later Medina period, this incident with Jibreel. But that time, Umar, his level of education is extremely high. He's been with the Prophet now almost 16, 17 years. Second question, what's Iman? You know, after the Prophet answered, did Umar say, yeah, but you know, what about this? Or hey, maybe that. He's quiet. Ihsan. Sayyidina Umar, he doesn't say anything, radiyallahu anhu. And then at the end, after Jibreel leaves, he says, thumma sarasa, which means, I sat there quietly, I never said anything. He's able to, فَلَبِثْتُ مَلِيًّا, I stayed there silently, he said. Right? He's disciplined. So, he loses his ego. It's not about his professional position. It's not about his education. He's one of the few people who can read and write in his time. So the first is to be very aware of the dangers of when we start to tell ourselves, you know, the community doesn't listen to me because I am, that's a problem. And that's why some Sufis, they say, you know, the word I am is a shaitanic word, yani. Ana khayr minhu. Ana, I. Always in the Quran, shaitan, I. We say, Iyaka na'budu. We. The second thing is we should be concerned with each other. And not in a way that is used to spy on people or to feel better because other people's children are having trouble, or, you know, this marriage is falling apart. MashaAllah, no, alhamdulillah. But to legitimately have concern as a community for one another, to organize and craft institutionalized concern. Look at the hadith again. Hadith of Sayyidina Jibreel, models community. When Jibreel comes into the community of the Prophet ﷺ, notice that the beginning of the hadith is very interesting. بينما نحن عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. We were with the Prophet ﷺ. So the idea is that the Prophet is with his community. We're just hanging out with the Prophet. There's no dichotomy. But then suddenly someone comes and we don't know him. We never saw him before. His clothes were clean, which means that clean clothes were kind of something rare amongst the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. His hair was not disheveled. So they're aware of new people. They pay attention to new folks. They welcome new folks. So they spend the early part of the hadith is talking about how he looked and we didn't know him and he came this. So we learn as a community to be concerned for one another, to look out for one another, to be welcoming. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever causes his fellow Muslim to be happy, Allah has made Jannah an obligation for that person. The third lesson is that we should be skilled in conflict resolution. You know, the only thing I worry about, you guys, is I see it everywhere. People have these really small, loving communities. We're all tight together. We got, dude putty coming straight off the stove. But where's the Kashmiri shot? There's a tremendous sense of belonging. And then the success of an institution puts stress on that relationship. So the third thing is I encourage you, honestly, to really think about having workshops in conflict resolution. One of the things in DC that we're trying to employ with people who want to join our center is that they have to take a workshop on conflict resolution. We tend to just hope that we won't have conflict, but we are going to have conflicts. How many ethnicities are in this one room right now? How many divergent philosophies and political ideologies and religious kind of directions are existing in one room? You have a younger generation, older generation, men and women with different concerns, from the Stanford Cardinals to the Berkeley Bears, right? Tremendous differences. So I encourage you as you move forward to really think about finding someone who knows what they're doing, not a sheikh or an imam, someone who knows what they're doing to lead the community through a discussion on conflict resolution. How do you settle disputes? Traditionally, it hasn't been done very well. People get mad, they get angry, they leave, they start a new community. Like, really? Gee, let's just burn resources, and burn more resources, and burn more resources in the name of frustrations. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَإِن طَائِفَتَانِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ اقْتَتَلُوا. When the believers fight, Allah acknowledges the fact that believers are going to fight. Here, fighting means with weapons. الْأَصْلِحَةِ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا. Make peace between them. Resolve the conflict. Right? So there should be really a strong conversation about not only conflict, but potential threats to the institution that will occur. Right? The cohesiveness of the community will be threatened because shaitan is working overtime. How do we get beyond that? And that takes us to the fourth. As communities, we have to be invested in communicating with one another. It's very important. Marriages, communication. Friendship, communication. Our relationship with Allah, who subhanahu wa ta'ala is predicated on an obligatory form of communication, is prayer. So there has to be open avenues of discussion amongst the community. Town hall, for example, that are facilitated by a third party, not the board president or the imam. Once I was in Boston and they wanted to have a town hall meeting and the facilitator didn't show up. And the discussion was, how can we improve the imam? And they're asking me to facilitate this discussion. So I said, mashallah, I was joking. I said, I don't think you even need to have this discussion. Like, the Imam is freaking amazing. This guy's awesome. Right? And then people were like, even though you're joking, like, we can't really share. Right? So having a third party to facilitate discussions around the community, right? The meaning of the community is extremely important. So those are things, insha'Allah ta'ala. I was thinking just to give a simple Iman lecture, but when you see the amana of this institution, right? You really have to think now about what it's going to mean. It's going to be like the most beautiful church in the city, right? Who has this view? Right? I mean, that's a sale for people. One day, perhaps, they're building this beautiful, I saw it happen in Phoenix. They built this really beautiful masjid, or tempe. And then they received a phone call from the city. And the city of Tempe was like, we just want to let you know, even though none of you are at our city council meetings, we just want to let you know that your building has been put on one of the historic landmarks of the city because it's so pretty. We had to do it without you because we couldn't find it. I'm sad, right? So you can see those kind of things happening. And alhamdulillah, here the community is much more mature in its engagement. But again, thinking about moving beyond the fashionable things and getting into the deeper meaning, the deeper issues, right? Islamophobia is forcing us to address meaning in a very powerful way. With the Quran, with the Prophet, we're encouraged to think deeper. Number two, we talked about the institution. Not to get caught up in how it looks and it's really cool. We're gonna have all these cool da'wahs and stuff. No. There's a deeper purpose behind, and I'm sure you already have crafted this, right? What this institution means. Those of you in the tech field, look at it like an app. Right? An app has to have a purpose if you're going to sell it. It has to be some kind of value prop. What's the value prop of the institution for the Muslim community? And he said it today. We're bringing all these programs. We're bringing excellent imams. Right? That's a value prop. It's beautiful. Right? We're bringing talented people. And then the third thing we talked about is being community members. The importance of dropping the ego. Right? Whenever one of my strategic consultants from Kennedy told me something, whenever you're in a meeting and you feel like you're about to make an emotional decision, don't make it. And secondly, he told me, whenever you're in a meeting and that little voice inside you is telling you, you're right because you're from here, or you're right because you have this, or you're right because they don't understand your awesome position. He said, usually you're wrong. So be careful about that. And the third thing we said is the ability to craft a community-led discussion. The last thing also that we should add is getting everyone involved. There should be young people having a stay in the youth, and what kind of programming the youth want, what they want to do, where they're heading. There should be women in your leadership who are sharing. Hey, this is, this is nothing to do with Sharia, by the way. This is absolute cultural nonsense. When people say, people will not be successful when a woman leads them. Many ulama, like Ibn Hajar said, what that meant is for those women, those people in particular that were led by that person, not other women in other situations. So everyone should have a part in this process. But barakallahu feekum, jazakumullahu khairan. We can take any questions, but I think you have great opportunity moving forward. The community is extremely invested financially. It's sanctioned its nonprofit by donating, which is an incredibly healthy sign, right? But we'll take any questions about anything, as long as it's easy, that you want to ask.
Can you please pass me this question?
Oh wow.
Forgot my glasses. So the first question is, how to guide / control a son who wants to spend hours in computer games and videos. Please advise in Islamic way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is you have to create a lock. I did that with my son. My son played Call of Duty about 25 hours a day. And FIFA. Yeah. So, and I almost did it too. But what we had to do is sit down to him and say, look, homie, you can play, but you have to earn the right to play. And we just made it based on a merit-based system. Merit-based system. And if you don't want to get along, then we can just throw it out the house. So you gotta be a little firm about it. You know? And mothers, you can't crack. And fathers, you can't crack. When we threaten a punishment and we don't follow through with it, then we are creating a massive problem. Because at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, I gotta do anything, so who cares? I've been there, I know. Right? So I think there has to be, first of all, not just like, oh my God, why do you play these games? Games are awesome. Right? Let's be honest, especially with those Samsung glasses. Games are amazing. But how do we create discipline? And you do that by respecting, saying, listen, I know these games are really cool and you like them and da-da-da-da-da, but if you don't get it together, you're in big trouble. You'll have no more games. So you have to create discipline. That's how you do it. And you have to be firm. And let them get mad and upset and all that. They'll be fine. They're teenagers. Right? Feed them some pizza or something.
So the next question is, in regards to Muslim American youth choosing their spouses, parents hold immense rights over their children. But what are the rights of children regarding choosing their spouse, especially for a young woman?
All right, I'm going to give an answer that will probably keep me from coming back for another 10 years. And that is, parents, you do not have a right to choose your child's spouse. It does not. Is that like a hallelujah? It's the wrong congregation. It's the wrong church, man. The Pentecostals are down the street. And I understand, but you don't have the right. I get this question. It's destroying children. And it's not fair to the person that you make them marry. It's like that TV show, Married at First Sight. You know, it is. Like that's it's like basically you don't know the person, you have nothing in, I mean, would we let our child go to the mall with a stranger? We're going to let them marry someone just because they're from our family, or they're from our village, or they're from our country. Man, it's been, especially with women in America, because these girls are American, right? It is a disaster. And it's getting worse now. It's exacerbated by the fact that younger American Muslims are now more American. You know, 30 years ago, they may have been more Desi, they may have been more Arab, they may have been fresh, right? But now you're talking about young people who have spent 90% of their lives or more in this country, are going to marry someone who thinks that 50 cents is change. It's a problem. And even the constructions of what love means, you know, that's a problem, right? So, no, they have a right to choose their spouse. What do we have a right to do as parents? To advise them. And if it's a code red, you know, like if my daughter wanted to marry Wiz Khalifa, that's where I'm like, no. Right? But if she wants to marry, you know, Rashid, the white convert who's been Muslim for 10 years from Bosnia, who works at Cisco, that's not Wiz Khalifa. That's a different person. It's not the midget from the Game of Thrones. It's a normal Muslim man, right? And I know when parents are hearing this, they're like, I hate this imam. I know, I have children, but trust Allah. That the Prophet ﷺ did not. In fact, when people came to him and complained that my parents are making marry someone, he would annul the marriage. Right? This is in Sahih Bukhari. Someone came to Imam Ahmed and said, and this is another problem. When we choose to marry someone, they come and say you have to divorce them. Man, this is fitna. Like, this is shaitanic. This is bad. You know, the Prophet said, it's reported that he said that when divorce happens, shaitan celebrates. So, someone came to Imam Ahmed and said that, you know, my parents want me to marry someone, I don't want to marry them. Then the parents came. And then he said, you don't have that right. This is Imam Ahmed. They said, what about Umar ibn Khattab? He ordered his son to divorce a woman, and then he ordered him to marry a woman. He said, when you become like Umar, come back and talk. Because what we don't realize is that Umar is a faqih. Omar is a scholar, right? And Omar is Omar. But I really believe that we have to guide, and I think also children, we need to listen to our parents' voices also, right? There's this sweet balance that has to happen, where we're not forcing them who to marry, but at the same time, if our parents are giving us legitimate reasons, for example, we found out that it's Wiz Khalifa, right? May Allah guide him. Or we found out, you're bringing home, Bieber, right? Those are legitimate concerns. Zayn Malik, well, Daisy, maybe. No, Zayn Malik. Gigi won't let you do that. But the point is, right, we should listen to my experience is when you listen to your parents, there's a lot of butter. But at the same time, who you spend the rest of your life with is your choice. No one has the right to make you spend your life with someone you don't like. Right? Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. Could you please elucidate some more of the legitimate reasons
For what?
that a parent might say no?
I mean, I think if someone has an abusive past, if someone has a reckless past that we know about, if someone is known to be a very shady person, those are all legitimate reasons now where the father could come and say no. Mother can say no. And they haven't reformed, right? If, say the person has another wife, hypothetically, right? No. Say that, I think a legitimate concern is like a new convert who's like a year in. And I think people need time. Like, honestly, I think 1 year is not really enough to really see egregious disrespect for your culture or your parents, right? Those are reasons to say no. Yes?
Sorry, just one more. What if that...
Gee, I wonder who wrote the question. Ahmed, do you know? I don't know either.
What if the convert's parents are not Muslims?
That doesn't matter. How many Sahaba were parents were non-Muslim? They got married, right? But again, let's talk about how long-term that may look. Are they non-Muslims who we can build with? Are they non-Muslims? Because, listen, extended family is very important to your parents, for a good reason. It cannot be negotiated. I've seen it work well. I've seen it where people just, it doesn't work at all, and I've seen it work well. But that's not in itself a reason to say no.
So the next question is, am I a disobedient child if I do not agree with everything my parents tell me?
What's going on? I was talking about institution building. The institution building. No one walk here, there's a hole in the floor that will drop you into a shark tank. Yeah. You'll block this man's video.
Recording.
It's awesome, man. Can you read that question one more time?
Oh, sure.
I need a bottle of Ruafsa. I need a bottle of 40 ounce Ruafsa. All right.
Am I a
No, I'm good.
Oh, there's water here. So.
Ruafsa.
Yeah. Oh, Ruafsa.
Kombucha.
So, am I a disobedient child if I do not agree?
I'm joking about Ruafsa.
If I do not agree with everything my parents tell me.
God. It's like the last time. No, you're not. Of course not. Like, how are you expected to do every single thing they tell you to do? That will be like the Egyptian government right now. Dictatorship, man. And parents, like, we can't expect them to do every single thing. Why? Because they're not angels. They're people. Right? So, we as our children get older, I have this with my daughter now. The autonomy, finding their own autonomy, which is we want them to be autonomous, but then respectful. So give them some room to make mistakes and screw up. See sometimes the good, and maybe they see it different than you do. And I'll ask you, do you ever agree that your children are right and you're wrong? That's a problem, because you can't be right all the time. Right? So how do you say, you know what, maybe I should have made aloo paratha instead of chicken karai. You know, you're right. You know, have you ever said this to your children? You're right. You know, I think one time one child, is that English? You're right. Like, I never heard that before. There has to be a balance, man. There has to be a balance. And Islam is not saying like, your parents like this, oh my God. This is us saying that so we can control you. Okay? But it's flexible. It's flexible. Unless it's like in the big things. Like if you know, if you're eating like Swiss cheese or sharp cheddar, and you know your mom is like, sharp cheddar. You're like, no, but I like Swiss. You're like, you're going to hell. And also in Christian, my parents used to do this to me, man. You know, orange juice, apple juice, like, Jesus ain't happy. Jesus don't care about juice. So, relax. Right. And the thing, parents, that you have to think about is, quit finding value in your children becoming what you want them to become. But you find value in what Allah has blessed them to blossom into. It's very different. We try to live vicariously through our children, we end up harming them. Right? And that's not fair. Like one girl said, my mother loves this man and I hate him. I said, you marry him. She said, well, I have your dad. Well, okay then. But I can't marry the guy you want me to marry because you like him. Like, I have to have some kind of say in this process. The same with the young men. But I will say we tend to raise our daughters and love our boys. We need to raise our boys too and love our daughters as well. What's next? What could be more controversial? I found my husband on Tinder. What's next? Say you want to be on the right side, you know? Swipe right.
These are no.
I don't know.
There are no lowball questions here. So this next one, I have noticed that there is a subtle and not so subtle racism that runs through the Muslim community. How do we combat that? Combat this, especially in regards to our converted brothers and sisters?
So I'm a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white man talking about the problem of racism in America. It's kind of problematic. Everything that, you know, a tremendous amount of my success was born on the back of privilege. America is a country which white Americans historically are the greatest subsidized people in history. Right? So I feel a little, you know, strange. I think in my experience as a white person, a white guy, people ask me, why do you change your last name? It's my 401k. You know, acknowledging, for example, the privilege you may have, and then trying to live with that responsibly. I think that's one of the challenges we tend to have in our community. And then, and this is going to sound harsh, like, what am I proud of as a white American? Am I proud of killing Indians? Am I proud of the structural oppression towards black Americans? And what am I really proud of? I think also it's a question people who have this problem should ask. What is it that makes you feel this way? And then they'll realize, you know, I'm really maybe just covering up some insecurities by acting this way. Yeah, but it has to be acknowledged and dealt with, and tova, repentance, and striving to be. And there's a difference, though, between racism and ignorance. Sometimes we may be ignorant of something. That's different than acting on. And sometimes we're fearful. You know, sometimes convert brothers explain to them, like, you know, maybe this brother doesn't speak English well, you know, so he's shy to talk with you because he doesn't want to make, like, mistakes or doesn't want to offend you. Right? So there's a process on both sides.
Next question is it okay for us to be American, except for the things that are forbidden to us in terms of our cultural identity?
What am I going to do? Of course, you're American. If you're born here, you know, you're as American as everyone else. And that's one of the goals of Islamophobia, as well as the far right in the Muslim community, to remind you that you're not American. So then what are you? You're kind of like lost. But you, like any other religious tradition or any other ethnic group or cultural group, you take the best and you leave the evil. And that's it. And that's why, you know, the majority of fit councils across the world have said it's allowed to get citizenship in America, right? It's allowed to take that on. It's not something forbidden.
The next question is, and I think both these questions are somewhat related.
Thank God.
How can we teach our youth to be proud in their Muslim identity post 9/11?
It's a challenge, but I think having strong institutions is key. You know, one of the things that I noticed in New Jersey, a community that I do some consulting for, is they have the soccer team that went 14-0. I mean, they smashed everybody. It's a high school soccer team. And now the girls are like, hey, we want a soccer team. And, you know, the whole entire community like got behind this undefeated soccer team. Right? So having activities that allow Muslim youth through their Americanness, goes back to the previous question, to be proud of something. I mean, believe it or not, most teenagers, you can't just tell them, hey, our mosque is cool, be proud. It doesn't really work. It has to be things they're doing, things that are happening in their lives, right? That they're able to reflect their Muslim identity off of and gain a sense of value from.
The next question, I think we have two left. Many women and men are getting older, ages 35 plus, in brackets. They keep rejecting people that they want to get married to. How do we convince them to, I suppose it's written, lower their standards?
So, I mean, I think this is a very good question, right? And I think it goes back to this kind of utopic expectation we have, number one, religiously for people, but then culturally. You look at the images that we see on TV, you look at the images we see through Bollywood. You know, these people, I mean, they have contouring now, right? They can actually change how your face looks. I have a TV show, Malaysia Women, so I know all about makeup. It's crazy, you know, concealer, all that stuff. But contouring, that was insane. It can actually make you look like a completely different person. And I think that when we allow those constructions of beauty to create what we see as being reality, we tend to have a really, really, I would say, false set of expectations around the spouse that we're looking for. If we're talking about emotional maturation, intellectual compatibility, that's a different issue. Those are very real, I think, concerns. But beauty, you know, you got to be in the 75% range. You know, you've got to be able to bend. Spirituality, you've got to be in the 75% range. Professionalism, 75% range. So I would talk with those people and try to understand, why do you keep saying no? Understand also, for a woman in the Muslim community, unfortunately, it's really a one-shot opportunity. And, you know, the idea of whoever I marry, if it doesn't work, I may be sentenced to being single for the rest of my life. So I got to make sure that I choose the Tesla 30, you know. I got to get the best one. And that's also part of the existential crisis we have in the community about women. So I would want to have a conversation, right, with those people. Why do you turn down everybody that comes your way? And that would probably help us then find Ryan Gosling or something with a kufi on it.
Ryan Gosling with a kufi.
Yeah, Gosling.
The next question is, and it looks like this comes from one of our youth who are here. How can the youth's voice be heard throughout the Muslim community, and perhaps in Evergreen Islamic Center?
That's a good question. So how, as young people, can you be heard? And well, you have to earn people's respect. And by being young, unfortunately, some people, not all, but some people may not listen to you just because you're young. So you've got to earn it. Number two is, I think within the framework of Evergreen, ask to have a youth representative on the board or on the EC, right, who's able to say, hey, these are the concerns of a young man and a young woman. These are the concerns that we have. This is the budget. Put a budget together. It's the budget that we need for next year. And that's how you're going to get your voice heard. But understand this well. Even Muhammad, he's so special. But if he doesn't act, he won't be heard. Like, you're not that awesome, right? I'm not that awesome where I can just be quiet and like, why don't people hear me? Don't they know how awesome I am? Like, that's not how life works. Right? Malcolm X said the squeaky hinge gets the grease. Right? Where there's noise, there's attention. So, participating within the confines of the community, trying to find a voice that shares what you want to see happen is extremely key.
Great. I think this question I just got is very similar, which as a youth, I want to be involved more with the masjid to bring other youth at the masjid, but I feel like elders focus on other things. How do I bring change while respecting elders?
Yeah, I mean, one of the models that we're seeing now in nonprofits, especially like mosques, is the idea of like cultures within a broader culture. There's subcultures. Like, for example, we have a baby boomer community. So that community has certain needs that need to be addressed. We have a singles community. We have a divorcee community. We have families. We have professionals. So within that, you have to be able to craft your own programming. Right? So you have like a subculture of youth. And the institution needs to understand that people need to leave you alone, right? People, of course, for someone who's perhaps much older and culturally distant from your culture, they see you, hoverboarding in the parking lot. That's like a bid'ah. That's like blowing their mind, right? But there has to be an understanding. That goes back to what I talked about the meaning of the institution. There needs to be an environment that says, listen, no one is allowed to emotionally, physically, or verbally abuse the community. No one is allowed to go and religiously reprimand them except the imam. That's the job of the imam. So what we do is, instead of going and yelling at the youth because they're wearing, Kaepernick shirts, unfortunately, I have the RG3 ones. It's like worth nothing now. But Kaepernick may make a comeback. But we have someone go to the imam and say, hey, I saw this kid. He wasn't wearing the Tom Brady jersey. This is horrible. It's an egregious violation. Please tell him to take off that Kaepernick jersey. So now the imam, that's his job. And what you do is you force the imam now to develop relationships with people in the community. And you protect the community from the police. So I would say that there has to be that subculture of young people in the community. They have to be given the freedom to kind of make mistakes and do youth things, and given that bandwidth, if you will, right, to do their program.
Great. Last question. A lot of 10, 12, 14-year-olds carry their iPhones with them, or cell phones, and they're glued to it all day and night. What advice would you give them?
Just pray a lot. It's a tough one. It's difficult, and I don't think that there's a simple answer for how fast this has happened socially, and then how it's carried over socially. But it goes back to, what meaning do they extract from having these phones? Right. A lot of them are using it for social, Snapchat and Twitter and Yik Yak. And, there's a million of these things now. How do they communicate with their friends? I think, again, you have to set down very clear rules about time. How much time are you going to use? Right? We have a 9 to 5. Like, I have a rule. So when I go home at 5 o'clock, I'm not imam anymore. That's done. Unless, of course, it's the real emergency too, not just to have an emergency, but like a real emergency. Other than that, no. So I think there has to be family time has to take place. Has to be a time. It's interesting, I was in Malaysia visiting my children, live in Malaysia with their mother, and I went there and I said, hey, let's go out today, and you guys, I made this mistake, you guys leave your phones. And she found, my daughter said, what about you? You leave your phone. And I was like, back. I got that new Angry Birds too. Like, okay. I was like, but I use it for work. She's like, if you're gonna ask us to do it, you gotta do it too. I was like, but what about like a GPS shit? We'll take a cab, right? And then, so we spent the day together without phones. I felt like I lost an arm. Like, you really feel like you lost an organ. And then afterwards, you know, my son said to me, "Is like, this is like the best time we spent together in years." You know, because we're like invested in each other. It's like weird, right? So I think modeling this behavior with them is crucial as well. Like there should be times where none of us, like dinner time, we're going out for dinner, no phones, right? Social events with each other. We need to pay attention to each other. Parents too. So that we're modeling now this best practices, if you will. I think that's the way to go with that one. And then at home, you have, you know, phone hours, phone on, phone off. Right? Put a block on that Wi-Fi. Cut their data on their cell phone. Right? Don't get them T-Mobile. Halas?
I think that's it.
بارك الله فيكم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه.
Just quick